Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now, Azure, Microsoft's Azure. You've probably heard of it, but do you know how to use it and where it can come in handy? So today I'm going to go ahead and break down a couple of the popular Azure services, in particular, the ones that leverage AI to make our life a little bit easier. And I'm going to give you a little demo of each one in action. So we're going to be covering 4 very popular Microsoft Azure services. The first one, of course, is the OpenAI service. This is one of the most popular services that Azure has to offer, and it allows us to deploy some very popular AI models such as GPT-4, GPT 3.5 Turbo, and if you want to see even one of those builds, you'll see it pop up on the screen right now. And it even allows us to go ahead and deploy the Whisper model. Now, the Whisper model actually allows us to go ahead and transcribe my voice into text using AI. So some pretty cool stuff that you can do with this. Second up, we have Microsoft Azure's AI Translator. Now, this one is really awesome if you're looking to build a kind of translation app. I actually went ahead and built one right now. It was going to pop up on your screen, and I'm even going to show you how to get it up and running in today's video as well. Now, third on the list, every single great app needs an awesome database. This is where Microsoft Azure's Cosmos database comes in clutch. It is a unified AI database, and it allows us to go ahead and use our favorite databases, NoSQL, SQL, anything in between with this setup. So this gives us the scalability of Azure, the security of Azure, as well as the flexibility of using our tech that we want to use in the way that we want to use it. And fourth and finally, we're going to be covering Microsoft Azure's Cloud Functions. This is going to allow you to go ahead and deploy your own cloud functions into the cloudosphere, whatever we want to call it, and run a serverless setup. So this is going to be awesome if you want to go ahead and plug into other AI services, or you want to build something completely custom of your own. This is going to have you covered. So smash that thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's jump straight into it. So a little prerequisite before we jump into our first Azure service. What I want you to do is click that first link in the description, and you're going to get 12 months worth of free services from Azure, as well as $200 US worth of credit. So head over to that link right now, and you should land over on a page, fill out the details, and after that, click the sign up button, and you'll land on a page similar to this. Now, so you can see for yourself, popular services are free for 12 months, which is awesome. We can go ahead and use that. And as you can see, guys, we've got the SQL database. Blob storage is actually an awesome storage mechanism. I'm not going to cover that in today's video, but if you're interested in Azure Blob storage, I have a video popping up on your screen right now that I go ahead and run through the entire thing in detail, so you can check out that entire build right now. And of course, today, as I mentioned, we're going to cover the Azure Cosmos DB, Azure Functions, and a few others. So remember, as I mentioned, all of the things that we spoke about in the intro are going to be covered in this free trial, so it's worth going ahead and signing up, and you get $200 worth of Azure credit, which is always nice as a bonus. So we're going to jump into our first Microsoft Azure service, the Whisper model. So let's head over to the Azure OpenAI Service page, and here you can go ahead, give it a read, and get started yourself. But you are going to need to apply for access for this first service. All the rest of them will actually be granted immediately. However, for this one, because it involves a little bit more intricate details on Microsoft's behalf, you just need to go ahead and click on apply for access, fill out the form, and they tend to get back to you fairly quick. And I always get the question of, if it asks for a company, what do you put in? Simply just pop your name in, and you should get approval fairly fast. So don't worry. But once you've done that, we're going to go ahead and jump into how to use it. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is actually the Whisper model. So here's a little breakdown on the docs on the website. So here we have the Whisper model itself. Now, this is a speech to text model, so you can go ahead and transcribe audio files. But what I would actually say is you can actually do a couple of cool things. In my Siri 2.0 build, I actually went ahead and actually built out a full, AI assistant that actually takes the voice, captures it in an audio file, passes it over to the OpenAI instance. And in fact, it will be the Whisper model that we've deployed on the Azure OpenAI instance, and then it will actually go ahead and transcribe it and return it back in a REST response. Super easy to get set up, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing that I need you to do is sign up to your Microsoft account. So you can do that over on the first page that we spoke about. Click on start for free. This is a very quick sign up process. You fill in a couple of details. So once you've signed up, what you need to do is head over to portal.azure.com, and you'll reach this page. Now, I've already got a couple of things that I've actually already been working on, But what I would recommend is the first thing that you will have to do is set up something called a subscription. So you can go ahead and type it in here, subscriptions, and go ahead and pop it up. Now you would have either been prompted this when you set up, or you would have to do it now. And the first thing that you would have to do is click on add and create a new subscription. Now think of subscriptions like a container that allow the sort of access to different resources inside of Azure. And the good thing about this is we can create several subscriptions, and then we can control our level of spend based on which service we want to allocate to each subscription. So you could have three, services using one subscription, and then say if we want to limit the spend to say a more expensive service, then we can simply create a new subscription and just put that service underneath it. So in this case, if I was to go ahead and pop in, the following, then you can go ahead and click on review and create and move forward and so forth. But I've already done this step, and again, I've already created a billing account as well, so you would be prompted during your setup to go ahead and do that to get this up and running. But it's fairly straightforward to go ahead and do that. But the next step that you would want to do is go ahead, and I've got it here, but you can simply type it in, is go ahead and type in OpenAI. Okay, and you'll get Azure OpenAI as your first option. So what you want to do now is you can actually see I've got lots of examples where I've actually built it out myself. And if you want to go ahead and build it out yourself, where I've actually shown the full use case, the code, everything involved inside of this, you can check out my Siri 2.0 clone and my Google Translate clone. They're going to be popping up on the screen right about now. But the Siri 2.0 clone allows me to go ahead and transcribe the audio from the input and then get an AI assistant response. So we've actually combined two different models there. The Google Translate clone actually takes the input, uses the Whisper model to transcribe it into text, and then passes it over to a separate Azure service known as AI Translate, which we're going to cover in a bit. So over to our deployment. Now, the first thing that I want to do is click on create, and you want to go ahead and select the subscription, as I mentioned before, and a resource group. Now, I've got lots of different resource groups. Think of this like your project. So in this case, if I was to create a project right now, we could just say demo project, and then we can go ahead and click OK, and then region. Now, it's worth mentioning that yes, whilst you can select any of these regions, only two, I believe, have access to the Whisper model, one of which being North Central US. So if you click on any other of these deployments, you won't actually get the Whisper model, which will allow you to transcribe the speech into text, right? So in this case, we're going to click on North Central, and I'm just going to type in a demo project. And then we're going to click on a pricing tier. Now, standard S0 is completely fine. But if it's your first project, you can actually go ahead and get a free pricing tier as well. So go ahead and click on review and submit. And then you want to go ahead and simply click on create. And this will go ahead and create your first Azure OpenAI instance. And this is essentially what you're going to do to get everything up and running. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create right now, and then it will initialize the deployment. So then you'll reach this page where we have our deployments in progress. Now, I've already done this step, so I'm not going to spend too long here to go ahead and do that again. I'm going to simply jump over to another project. So I actually had this Siri Assistant demo here. So I'm going to simply click that, pop that open, and this is essentially what you're going to see right now. There's a couple of important things that I want you to take notice of here: keys and endpoint. So this is really the magic to go ahead and connecting to. There you can see our old deployment just succeeded, so you can go ahead and do it for yourself. But here, so you can see the endpoint is very important. You're going to actually need to store this in your environment files in your code, and the region as well. And then you've got your keys. Now, in this case, I'm not going to show my keys, but you can simply copy your key and use it inside of your code and so forth. That is how you go ahead and access the API. However, the more important part is all we've done so far is create a OpenAI instance. So we need to actually create a deployment of the Whisper model. So we go to model deployments, we click on manage deployments, and inside of here, this is where we can deploy things like GPT-4, GPT 3.5, the Whisper model, and so forth. And that's how we go ahead and interact with the OpenAI services through Azure's architecture. So what we want to do is, I've already got the deployment actually up and running, but you want to go ahead and click on create new deployment. Click on select a model, click the little drop down, and here you can see a list of different models. Now, it's worth mentioning again that if you don't see Whisper here, it's probably because you didn't select North Central, and it's either North Central and there's one more location. However, in that case, you would not be seeing these if you deployed, for example, to East US, right? You can only see like the popular GPT 3.5 Turbo and 4 and so forth. So if you want any of these other models, you actually have to go ahead and deploy to the central one. So in this case, we click on Whisper, and I've already deployed this, so I've got, I've maxed my quota for now. that's fine. But in this case, you could click your model version to auto update and then give it a name. Now, once I click create, what will happen is it will simply just create this. So I've called mine Siri Assistant, and then you've got the model name here. And you even got the 3.5 Turbo edition where I popped in as well. And we use this in a separate build. So if you were to go ahead and click in that, you should see the deployment has succeeded. Everything is good to go, right? And then what I would recommend as well is that if you ever wonder why it could be slow after you start using it, it's because they actually rate limit it up to 3 requests per minute. And you have to go ahead and request a increase in that quote if you want to get a higher capacity or throughput. That's only for the Whisper model. That's not for, the GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, but that's how you go ahead and do it. So let's get this up and running inside of our code. And then once this is open, we simply need to go ahead and get our environment variable set up. So if I go ahead and create an environment variable file, so let's go ahead and pop in a file called .env.local. And we're simply going to pop in our keys here. So heading back over, remember those keys that we spoke about earlier. Let's head back over to our portal. And remember the keys and endpoint. Well, I'm going to need you to actually save the endpoint, the location, and the key. One of these would be absolutely fine. So the first thing that we're going to do is pop in 3 things: the Azure endpoint, the Azure deployment name, and the Azure deployment completions name. In this case, for the deployment name, I'm actually referring to the Whisper model. So we can actually rename this to maybe be like the Whisper model. Right, and then in this one, we can go ahead and I'm calling it completions because I'm using 3.5 Turbo. Now, in this instance, we've got the Azure endpoint. So this was actually found here. You can go ahead and use this, but in this case, we don't need it. It's okay for now. But for the key, I simply copy it and then I will pop the key above it. So we can actually go ahead and say something like Azure API key, and I can simply pop in the key here. So at this point, I would copy this, paste it in here, and then save and close this file. So I'm going to do that right now. So I just saved that file, closed it, and now we're going to head into our code to go ahead and make the request. Now, in the essence of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys each of the projects that we actually demonstrated this on, so you can go ahead and get a fast forward to understand how it all works in one piece. So here I have the YouTube AI build that I went ahead and built on YouTube not too long ago. This was for the Siri 2.0 build, which will be popping up on your screen right now. The code is available in that description. So in the first link of that video description, you can go ahead and get all of the code there. You just have to simply fill out the Microsoft form and you'll get access to this. Now, in this point, what we can see is over here, we have our page. And inside of our page, all we've done is we've done the exact same setup for the environment files, but here we have a form, and all we have in this form is a file to go ahead and select some audio. Now, I'm not going to go too far into the detail, but the main magic happens when we submit our form. So inside of Next.js, we have something called a server action, and this is where the magic happens. So first things first, I'm going to check if any of my credentials are incomplete. And if they are, I'm simply going to throw an error. Otherwise, I simply get the file, and this is going to be the audio file that I submitted. I check if the file is 0 or not. And then I'm simply going to go ahead and create something called an array buffer, right? So I'm going to do file.arrayBuffer, and I'm going to convert it to a uint8 array. Okay, so I simply take the file. So if you was to simply say on the front end, make the user select a file, upload that via the server action, in Next.js 13, we have server actions. You can go ahead and check out my video popping up right now, all about that, where I teach you how to do that. And then come back to this video. And over here, we simply have the audio itself. And this is where the magic of Azure Whisper AI Service comes in. So we simply go ahead and create an instance of our client. So we have to go ahead and ensure that we install the Azure OpenAI library. So you want to simply go ahead and pop open your terminal and simply run npm Azure/OpenAI. Simply do that, which I've already done. And then you want to create a client. And with this client, it takes the endpoint and a key credential. So this is essentially how we connect to our OpenAI instance. Now, the OpenAI instance, when I talk about it, is actually this entire instance, right? So all of the model deployments underneath it, we can access it once we have access to this client. Now, the next step is we simply go ahead and tap into some of the functions. So if you see here, I've got lots of different functions that I can do. Chat completions, for example, GPT-4, GPT 3.5, and so forth. In this case, we want to use the Whisper model, which is get audio transcription. We pass the deployment name in, which is this name. So remember, the deployment name is not any of these. It's the actual name that we deployed it under. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that one more time. It's really important that you do not mess this up. It took me way too long to understand this. I kept writing Whisper, but it's actually the deployment name. So in this case, it would be Siri Assistant, right, for the Whisper model. So you don't want to mess that up. It took me way too long to get that right. So in this case, Azure deployment name. So heading back over to our keys, make sure you go ahead and set these up correctly. And obviously you would put your super secret key here. The main thing is the deployment name matches the one that we saw previously here. Right, so make sure that works and then go over here. And then you can simply pop it in here, and then we've got the actual result. And to get the transcription, all you do is result.txt. And simply it is that easy to go ahead and get the text transcription. So from doing that, guys, it's super fast to go ahead and process the individual audio files. Now, I've shown you this in Siri and Google Translate builds actually have all of this built out. So again, it'll pop up on your screen right now if you want to go ahead and build those out and actually get it functioning. But in a nutshell, that is as simple as it gets. Now, why might you want to use this in the first place at all, right? Well, firstly, it's really fast, right? When I actually show this in the demo, and you'll see right now on the screen, I'll give a little snippet of the demo when I actually talked and see how fast the response was. It works blazingly fast. And this is thanks to Microsoft Azure's architecture and the combination that they have with the guys over at OpenAI with the Whisper model deployments. Because of the two hand in hand, you've got the scalability of Microsoft services such as Azure, and you've got the power of the Whisper model from OpenAI. It's a really great harmony of the two coming together. Everything I just showed you is great for files that go up to 25 megabytes. But if you need to go a bit bigger than that, then you might want to go ahead and check out the Whisper model via Azure AI Speech. Now, the difference between the two is we have Azure OpenAI Service and we have Azure AI Speech. And what you can do with this first one, which is not what we have demonstrated, we actually showed off the Azure OpenAI Service, but the first one here, the Azure AI Speech, can do a few cool things. Well, firstly, it can transcribe files larger than 25, so it actually chunks them up and then processes them. It can transcribe a large batch of audio files, so it actually, helps us out a ton, especially let's say you had a podcast audio, which can sometimes be hundreds of megabytes, especially if you're recording like very high quality audio. That can be a bit of an issue. So if you have any of these concerns or any of the sort of limitations, then you can actually go ahead and feel free to use the Whisper model via the Azure AI Speech service instead of the OpenAI instance that we spoke about before. But if you head over to documentation, you can select the two from this option here and make the decision that you need to. It's also worth mentioning that regional support for these differs. So the model that I showed you guys, as I mentioned before, is available in North, Central and West Europe only. So West Europe was the second one. And whereas the Whisper model via the Azure AI Speech service is actually East US, Southeast Asia and West Europe. So if those are factors that you really want to tie into, then it's worth checking out the two models. But either way, it's a damn awesome service and you can see for yourself in that awesome build that we delivered. Now, what if I want to use GPT or make a GPT messenger or something like that? How can I do that? Well, it gets even better, guys, because as I showed you before, we simply do a new deployment with the model being GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, and it's simply the same setup that we did. The only difference would be that the deployment name would change. So in that case, you would have a different deployment name. So if we head over to the example that I showed you previously, you can see we've got there, for example, here I've stored it in a different environment variable as your deployment completions name. So this is representing, GPT 3.5 Turbo. And once you've got that client that we spoke about previously, all you need to do is essentially go ahead and call the get chat completion. So earlier we called get audio transcription to use the Whisper model, but get chat completions will go ahead and essentially do what we expect it to do when we're talking to ChatGPT, right? So in this case, I've got ahead a few messages here. So I've got a system message pretending to be a helpful assistant, and then I'm passing actually in the text from the transcription, but you could go ahead and pass in any text that we provide here. Get the chat completion, and inside of the completions, choices, message content, you'll get the response itself. So it's as straightforward as that to go ahead and actually use it. So all in all, you get the power of OpenAI with the security and scalability of Azure. It's super flexible, and it even has filter controls and a customization panel to customize your AI to your specific needs. What's really cool is that if you even check out the playground over here, you have lots of different options to test out your chat itself. You can check out the completions. You can even create custom assistants where you can go ahead and set them up in the specific way. Again, you would be restricted to certain regions for that. Overall, a really, really nice way. I'd recommend you simply go to the Azure OpenAI over here and you get a nice little introduction to what you might be wanting. For example, I just demonstrated the Whisper speech to text, but we also have lots of different other options, including completions and, bringing your own data to go ahead and have a bit of a more bespoke use case. Next up, we have the Azure AI Translator. Now, this is an awesome service provided by Azure and essentially allows us to translate text near instantly to more than 100 different languages. And it really removes the complexity of building an instant translation setup into your app. And all you need to get it working is a single REST API call. Yep, I said it, a single REST API call, and it works just as we expect it to. It can even accurately detect the language of your source text. And I even showcase this inside of my Google Translate build, which will be popping up on the screen right about now. In addition, it's production ready with built-in security, so you don't have to worry about your text inputs that you go ahead and use during the translation, any kind of injection attacks or anything like that. It's all production ready, so you can actually go ahead and use it right now. And if you scale to 1 million users, you know that it's going to work with Azure's backing. So let me go ahead and show you how to implement this API into your personal project. Let's take a look. So over here, you can see we've got the Azure AI Translator page. And the best part about this, guys, is again, we get 2 million characters free tier every month for 12 months. So you can go ahead and play with this right now by hitting the first link in the description. So to get started, head over to portal.azure.com once you've signed up, then click on the search resources. And I've got it actually in my homepage, but you simply type in translators, head over to translators, and you can simply go ahead and create a new translator. So I'm going to click on create. And what we will see is we will get a subscription. So we can, as I mentioned before, we can select an appropriate subscription, create a resource group that we want to attach it to. So this is essentially the project. So in this case, I'm just going to demo project for Azure. And then we're going to click OK. And the region. So let's just type in, let's just say Central North Europe. Okay. And then we can click on a name and a pricing tier. Now, in this case, you see we've already got free 0. I think I've used this one, but if we go ahead and type in demo project Azure and so forth, and then click on review and create. Now, once you've done this, it will go ahead and create a translator. I'm actually already done all of this. So I'm simply going to take you to my translator that I've created. So in this case, I've got one here. So I've got YouTube Google Translate clone where I went ahead and rebuilt. And in this case, what you'll see on the right-hand side is you can only have one on the free tier. After that, it will be a paid tier. So I recommend you just play around with your free one until you need the paid one. So we go over to the Google Translate clone, which is on the free tier. Again, very similar setup, guys, to previously. You've got this nice little playground here. So if I was to type in, for example, hello world, you can actually see that it immediately will go ahead and translate it into, the appropriate language. In this case, we've got auto detection from English, and you can see it detects the language in the response and it gives the translations back. And you can actually translate into several languages in one request, which is really cool. You even have some sample code here, so you can actually see the backend Node.js code. You've got your key, which you can get from the keys and endpoints. So as I'll quickly show you right here, we've got the key, we've got the location, we've got the text translation. This is the one that we actually need. But let's go back to overview and let's look at that sample code one more time. And then we head over here and you can see basically this is like a nice little starting point. And I would really pay attention to, in particular, the headers here, because you would actually need to make sure that you input these headers correctly when you're making your REST request in order to get it across correctly. I made a couple of mistakes with the header naming and it caused me a few issues. So make sure you don't follow through with the same issue. But this is an example using Axios. And it's just simply a REST request, guys. You have the endpoint, which will be the api.cognitive.microsoft-translator.com. Then you have the /translate endpoint. Pass in the keys, the location. This will be like where you've deployed to and so forth. The parameters would be as appropriate. And then the from would be, if you don't include from here, it's actually auto detection. So they don't mention that in the sample code. But if you was to remove the from, it would be auto detection. And to would be simply an array of different languages that you would want to go ahead and translate to, okay? And then you would have the data, which is the text that you would want to, translate. So diving into some code for real here. You can click on view on GitHub, but I've actually done this already with a Google Translate clone. So on your screen, you'll see it popping up over right now. So in this demonstration, once we go into the translation form, we've got a form that we submit, and it simply has some input and some output that we'll go ahead and demonstrate. On the screen right now, you'll see a snippet of this build in live action, so a live demo of this. But what essentially happens is we submit this form action. This is a server action. Again, if you want to learn about server actions, see the video that's popping on your screen right now. But if I go to the translate server action, so here we have the input. So the input language and output language simply refer to EN for English, ES for Spanish, for example. So that would be the values there. Then we have the request itself. So this is a simple REST request, as we saw in the demonstration previously. And in this case, all I'm doing is I'm just checking if I passed in a input language, for example, a auto detection one, it would simply nullify this value. So this would not be included, which means it would auto detect the from language. Otherwise, if I passed in an input language, we would use that. For example, if I said I'm typing in Spanish or German, it would go ahead and put that there, and then it would translate it to the two. Okay, so in this case, this would be the output language. We pass in the actual input inside the data array here. So you just simply got an object, you pass in your data. This would be the text like hello world 123 to go ahead and translate. And then you simply make the request. So this will be the actual request itself. So after this, so we're just awaiting this request and we get the response. We simply pass it with response.data, right? And as I'm using Axios, I don't have to await response to JSON, but in this case, we got the data. And then once we have that data, guys, it's as simple as actually tacking into the data translation text. And this will actually give me back the text that we were literally, we expect to get back. This would include the value that we actually get back over here. So if, for example, if I was to type in hello world, so everything that you saw on the screen right there, this right here, the translations.txt would be inside of this data 0 translations.txt. And it's as simple as that, guys. And in this instance, I simply return it to my client and carry on as needed. So if you want to go ahead and build that out, you can feel free to check out the Google Translate clone. But as simple as that, guys, you can go ahead and get AI text translations inside of your app at a production-ready, scalable approach. That's incredibly powerful. So give it a try and let me know how you get on in the comments down below. Next up, we have the Azure Cosmos database. This is a unified AI database, and this one is probably one of the more really important parts of your app. So this is going to support a really core fundamental part of your app. It's essentially where all the data is stored. Now, what's really cool about this, guys, is that you can go ahead and set up several types of databases within Azure Cosmos DB. So you can go ahead and set up fully managed NoSQL databases or relational SQL databases, and you can simplify your application development by just having one single AI database for all of your needs. This includes caching to vector searches and so much more. But you might be wondering, okay, but how is this an AI service, right? Well, this actually allows you to go ahead and use AI database functionalities like native vector search or seamless integration with other Azure AI services to support things like retrieval augmented generation. So if you want to go ahead and find out more about that, definitely check out their documentation. But it's really cool because once it's inside of that ecosystem, for example, once your database is up and running in Cosmos DB, you can go ahead and plug in other Azure AI services really simply, right? And if you're concerned about scalability, don't worry, guys. It offers cost-efficient serverless options. It has automatic scaling that simply just adjusts your application's requirements, which is what we want when we have a database. And it ensures that if your app was to get 1 million users tomorrow, it's not going to simply crash and burn. It will simply work. So let's go ahead and get this set up right now, and then I will run through some of the advantages of using the Azure Cosmos database. All right, so heading back over to your portal, so you're going to find this place to be familiar, and you can see pretty much it's fairly straightforward. Once you've got it up and running, you don't have to worry too much. You can keep coming back here, adding new services, which I think is really, really clean and nice. So if I go to the search over at the top and I type in Cosmos DB, you see a bunch of different options here, so different types of databases, but let's just click on the generic Azure Cosmos DB, and you can see I've already created a couple here. Now, if you want to click on create to go ahead and create a new database, then you'll get a nice little pop-up which basically suggests the different APIs that you can go ahead and work with it. And this is one of the first benefits. It supports several different open source APIs, right? So in this case, you've got Postgres, you've got MongoDB, you've got Table, Apache Cassandra, NoSQL, lots of different things that we can go ahead and use. And it has SDKs for popular languages such as JavaScript, so we can go ahead and use this straight away in our app. And the best part is that when we deploy this, guys, it's actually multi-regional. So in this case, the data is distributed across their massive network of servers, so you can ensure that your app is actually blazing fast. So that way, when users request data, it's immediately available to them, cached on the edge, which is really awesome. So in this case, I'm simply going to go ahead and proceed with MongoDB because it's a very popular choice, and I've actually gone ahead and done all of this inside of the Google Translate clone. So again, it's going to pop up on your screen if you haven't already seen it right now. So let's click on Create right here, and you guys can see we get two different options. So I'm going to go with the vCore cluster. It's the recommended approach, and it's very simple to get up and running. Simply click on Create, and again we follow the simple setup procedures. You'll get used to this setup procedure. Simply pop in a resource group and a subscription that you want to attach the billing to, and in this case you will get a free tier. Now I've already done this for a project, so I think I've exhausted my free tier now, but you can go ahead and use your free tier, pop in a cluster name. So this would simply be the name of your your database cluster, the location, your version. So in this case, you can change between 5 and 6. And more importantly, this is the area that I want you to pay attention to. So for your admin username, put a username here that you're not going to forget. Okay, so put this down, write it somewhere. So in this case, if I was to put username 123, that is going to be the username to access the database. And same with the password, put down a password that you're not going to forget. If I was to pop in, it's got to have a capital letter and so forth, pop in that password and simply go ahead and set it up like so. Do not forget these values because they're quite important, and it allows us to go ahead and connect to our MongoDB in the next step. So I'm going to click on review and create, but I've actually already done this now, right? So I'm not going to do this all over again. I'm going to go ahead and it's going to fail because I've already used my free tier and I forgot to put a name in. But once you've done that, what will happen is you'll go back to Azure Cosmos DB. So you'll have one option here. And in this case, I've already set up a MongoDB instance of Cosmos DB here. So I'm going to click on that. You will now see this Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB vCore, right? Now, once you've got this up, the main thing that I need you to do is if you click on Quick Start, you'll see a launch quick start guide, which you can go ahead and check out. You can go ahead and connect to your MongoDB with Studio 3T, or you can simply use a shell, right? So you can even go ahead and use sample data and so forth. But the main thing really that we're going to want to care about is the connection string, because that allows us to connect to the MongoDB from our application, right? So you can see this connection string right here. You simply would just replace the user with the username that I told you to save earlier. Make sure you save it, and the password that I told you to save earlier as well, right? So you simply keep the colon, but replace the user with the username and the password with the password. Now, once you've done that, let's head over to our app and get building. So here we have the Google Translate YouTube clone that I've been talking about quite a lot throughout this video. But in this instance, if I was to go over to our database file, and this is where all the magic starts off, you can now see here, we have the connection string, and in this build, I'm using something called Mongoose to interact with the MongoDB. And honestly, it's as simple as having your connection string and connecting via Mongoose. So I'm actually using Mongoose here to make life a lot easier, right? So I'm just doing mongoose.connect connection string, and I've stored my username and password in environment variables, which I would recommend that you do to keep your app secure and you access it on the server side in a secure fashion, right? So in this case, Next.js by default, this is server side, so it's safe. And you can see this will allow me to connect to that Microsoft Azure instance. And guys, it just works. It works. It now scales. Everything interacts. But you probably are wondering at this point, how can I actually see the data in my database? Maybe you don't want to go ahead and download something like T3. I think it's called, Studio 3T or something like that. I don't actually personally use this. Instead, what I would recommend here is more of a bonus tip, is go ahead and download the MongoDB extension inside of VS Code. So if you type in MongoDB, you'll actually get a nice extension, and this works perfectly with our Azure deployment. So in this case, download this, go ahead, and all you're essentially doing here is you can go ahead and create new, and pop in a connection string, and you simply paste it in while you replace your username and password, and you'll get access to your entire database, guys. So it's as simple as that. You can see here, I've got some data inside of this database, and I can actually go ahead, and this is from the YouTube live that we went ahead and built with the Google Translate clone. You can see the translations that are happening. And these translations, by the way, guys, are using the Azure AI Translate service. So you can see very much living proof that it does work, and it's awesome. All right. So this is a really nice way of actually working with your database. And I would highly recommend that you learn how to go ahead and do it, because it's really, really awesome, and it scales perfectly as and when you need it. So a really important point, when you set up your database with Azure Cosmos DB, it will ask you about public access. Now, if you are using Next.js, it's worth knowing that Next.js tends to go ahead and actually try and access the backend from different dynamic IPs unless you're on the enterprise plan. So it's actually a necessary requirement to go ahead and whitelist all of the starting IP addresses and ending IP addresses. That way it's publicly accessible. This is just something you have to do if you're using Next.js with something like Cosmos DB. And that's completely fine, because you can secure it in other ways on your database at the database level. But I would highly recommend that you just know this to prevent yourself from going in circles and getting rejected whenever you're trying to access it from your, let's say, Vercel deployment. So something just to be aware of in case you get stung with that. So just like that, guys, Azure Cosmos DB can be your go-to database for web apps, mobile apps, gaming, and Internet of Things apps, right? I've actually implemented the Azure Cosmos DB with MongoDB several times in lots of different production apps, and in fact, the Google Translate clone that I showed you now, and it worked flawlessly every single time. So definitely an ideal solution, and something I would recommend is this is a great way to use MongoDB if I have to suggest it to any of my students, because it allows you to set it up really easily, and you don't want to have to worry about it afterwards. All you really should be caring about in a lot of the time when we're starting out, when we're learning at the early stages, is just how to get it up and working so that it can scale and it can work in, like for example, a free setting, which is ideal. And then we want to actually focus on the development of building the app and working with MongoDB. And we don't really want to have to think about the database aspect, but this gives you the benefit of all of those things, the scalability, the security, all of that included. And once your database is flourishing and lots of users are using it, you can go ahead and tap into it with the additional Azure AI services. So win-win on both sides. So they always say save the best till last, and this is why I'm going to cover Azure Cloud Functions. Now, essentially, this is a serverless solution that allows you to write less code, maintain less of an infrastructure, and save on overall cost. And what do we really mean by this? Well, you can essentially write anything to a serverless cloud function and basically call it via a REST API, via a database trigger, or anything else. And we just want to be able to use them for lots and lots of different bespoke situations. But you shouldn't have to worry about deploying and maintaining servers. We just want to go ahead and deploy it and not worry about it, right? And this is where Azure comes in clutch. You write your own code in your preferred language using your favorite development tools, and then you simply deploy it to the Azure cloud, and it just works. It's that simple. So that way you can focus on the code and what matters most to you, and Azure Functions will handle the rest. So here's a couple of cool things that you can do with the power of Azure Cloud Functions. Well, firstly, you can process file uploads by running code when a file is uploaded or changed in Azure Blob Storage. And I've actually done this in the DALI 2 clone. So we're actually going to dive into that a bit today. Right, and you can also build a scalable, web API by implementing a set of REST API endpoints for your web apps using HTTP triggers. So you can see here, we can actually go ahead and respond to, for example, files being uploaded to, different Azure services. Again, a benefit of keeping everything in the Azure, ecosystem means that you can go ahead and tap into these different triggers on the different services that they provide. Now, another way of actually going ahead and triggering your cloud function is by responding to database changes. And you can set different custom logics here, or you can keep it pretty simple. For example, if a document was added in Azure Cosmos DB, for example, the previous demo that I just showed you, let's say a Google Translate edition was added to our Azure Cosmos DB. So we made a new translation, they got added to the user's database. Then let's say we wanted to trigger a cloud function to email them every single time to say, hey, your new translation is now ready. we can basically use a cloud function to do just that, right? So you can really customize it for a bunch of different reasons. And the best part about this is that Azure Cloud Functions provide a variety of hosting options depending on your needs and your app workload. So there's lots of flexibility here. But enough talking, guys. Let's dive into a deep dive onto how to implement cloud functions into your app. And honestly, I've got a couple of tricks here that I want to show you. So here we are inside of our code for the GPT DALL-E 2 clone. And you can go ahead and check out that video right now. It's going to pop up on the screen. All of the source code is in the description of that video inside the Papa GitHub repo. But the main thing that I want to draw your attention to is that we have this Azure folder. And this essentially represents where our cloud functions live. And you can see we've got the different functions. If I click into get images, you can see that this is a function. If I click generate image, the main thing I want to take you to is actually the function header. So in this case, you can see this. This is essentially a HTTP triggered cloud function, and it's called generate image. It accepts post requests to it, and we've got an auth level of anonymous. So this means that basically we're saying anyone can make a post request to that endpoint and basically access it. And then you can do a bunch of things that we need to do and basically return a response. So this is a function essentially living in the cloud, which accepts a post HTTP REST request, right? So very, very handy. And we can even have like, lib files, so, different things which can help us out. But the main thing is the source functions folder. These are going to be the 4 cloud functions that I created inside that build. I want to mention as well, if you have environment variables inside of your app, it works slightly different with cloud functions. They will live inside of the local settings JSON. So if I click into this file right now, you can see we've got lots of different keys here, including an OpenAI key here. So at this point here, you've got the local settings.json, right? And this is really important. So I want you to actually add the keys in here. So that way, when you go ahead and do process.environment account key or account name, it will be actually pulling it from here, account key and account name. Right? And that's actually how you're going to go ahead and use environment variables inside of your cloud functions. But rewinding a step, how did we even create that folder, right? So I don't want to have to manually do all of that. How can we do that in an easier way? Well, it's very, very simple. What we do is we simply go to the extensions, type in Azure, and first thing we want to do is install the Azure tools. Okay, so Azure tools installs 8 different extensions, and they include a variety of different Azure services that we can go ahead and tap into. So Azure Functions being one of them. So if we head over to our Azure sidebar, so in this case right here, you can see I've already connected to our Azure account. But if you weren't connected, Command-Shift-P, type in Azure, sign in, and you can see right here, we've got like a sign in to Azure Cloud and so forth. You want to simply sign in, or it very simply will prompt you here. Then you can see your subscriptions. You can click on it. You can see in function apps, I actually did another build where I used a cloud function as well called the Disney clone, and that will actually be popping up on your screen right now. So this clone right here, if we go into our dashboard, I'll show you from the beginning. If we go to functions, so function apps, this basically represents cloud function, Disney 2 clone. So I have the Disney 2 clone that we actually deployed over there. And you can see here that I've actually got the deployment. So get AI suggestion YouTube, and you can see that is enabled. It is live. So this is actually a cloud function. Everything that you need essentially is here. So once we've done that, guys, you'll see the Disney 2 clone is here. So I'm actually going to show you that code right now, and you can check out that video if you want. I'm going to pop it up on the screen right now. So Disney 2 clone, let's head over to that build right now. So over here we have the clone. Now it's worth mentioning here, you can see function folder. Now inside this function folder, I've got source and functions, and then you've got the function that we actually deployed. So this is actually the deployed function that you guys can see over here. So if I go to the actual deployment, so overview, you can see the function that we actually see down here in just a second correlates to the get AI suggestion YouTube. So that's actually the same function, which is awesome, right? Now, if you want to actually go ahead and get this set up for first time round, you can actually go ahead and say you didn't have the function set up. You just had a Next.js app. You could do Command-Shift-P, Azure, functions, and then here you can see, look, we've got a lot of different things. You've got create function app in Azure. This will actually create a brand new function app, which means essentially if we hadn't, say we were creating a brand new project, in that case you could start it like this. And in this case I've already created the Disney 2 clone, but here you would create your project with that line. But let's say I've already created the project and I want to simply create a function within that project. So let's go ahead and click on create function, and you can see I get different triggers, right? So in this case I want to do a HTTP trigger, so very simply, and I just need to give it a name. So in this case, let's go ahead and say like the name for this function would be add 10 numbers together. Okay. And then we click on enter. And now you can see, guys, it went ahead and generated the code for me, which is really awesome. So I didn't have to do any of this, and it gave me the dummy code already. And you can see here, it actually gave me the app, the signature. So HTTP, which is the trigger, accepts get and post requests, the name of the function, auth level. So in this case, anonymous, anyone can go ahead and do it. And it went ahead and popped it in here. Right. So what I would recommend is the first step before you were to do this is to go ahead and, firstly, go ahead and create a function app. So this would actually be, when you select your subscription, you go ahead and create a new functional app. So in this case, let's say it was a brand new project. I would call this one like demo project Sunny. Right, and then go ahead and hit enter. This will actually create a brand new project. So in this case, imagine you didn't have function here. Then you could do like, let's just say Node.js 18, fine. And then you would have a resource. You see, and this will actually set it all up, guys, on the actual Azure dashboard. So rather than doing the setup process on Azure, so in this case, rather than doing it over here, so rather than clicking create and so forth, I've actually done it from here now. So create function app, right? And it's worth mentioning that previously I just showed you how to create a function, but if I didn't have a function folder, it would actually have created all of this for me as a template. So you would ask you which folder you would like to put it in. And at that point, you can simply type in functions. Just remember that this is actually a separate project. So you've got its own independent node modules outside of your node modules. So make sure you don't commit that to your Git repository. But this will actually go ahead and create, and you can see it's running through the steps right now, creating the appropriate resources. And then you can actually go ahead and use that, which is pretty damn cool. And if I wanted to go ahead and deploy this cloud function now, how do I do it? Well, it actually is just as easy. Command Shift P, I type in Azure, and I can type in deploy. And you can see here, deploy to function app. So let's say I'm in this file, I click deploy to function app, I do Azure subscription 1, and then I will actually get the different clones. So now this one hasn't actually finished deploying yet, but let's say I wanted to deploy add 10 numbers together to Disney 2 clone. I simply hit enter, and look at that. While I've done that, it's actually created that, which is awesome. And it will ask me, are you sure you want to deploy to Disney 2 clone? This will overwrite any previous deployments and cannot be done. If I click on deploy now, this will actually go ahead and try to deploy the local functions now. So in this case, it will go ahead and you get an output here, but while it's doing that, we can go and check on ourselves. Did it go ahead and add it? Guys, look at that. Perfectly added the demo project, all from our VS Code, which is awesome, right? And in this case, it's deploying to the app Disney 2 clone. So let's actually see if it's deployed. This is really, really cool. And like I said, guys, I just went ahead and simply did Command Shift P, and I was able to write it from this. Now, again, I mentioned previously about this local settings, right? Now, this is really important. If you are using any environment variable inside of your code, I want to make sure that you do it correctly. So in Next.js, you typically do env.local file, but in the cloud functions, we do local.settings.json. We add in the key, and then you simply go ahead and do Command Shift P, upload. So if I type in Azure, you upload local settings. That is how you go ahead and upload your environment variables, so your local settings to the cloud. So that way it's updated with the local correct settings as well. But let's go ahead and check on that, guys. Our Disney 2 clone cloud function, and we should see now a second cloud. There we go, guys. Look at that awesome stuff. Add 10 numbers together is now live. So we can go ahead and see that for itself. So get function URL, and look at this, and remember it's anonymous, so we should be able to make a GET request to this, and just like that, hello world, boom, we've just deployed a cloud function in a matter of minutes, right? Absolutely easy stuff, and that is a scalable cloud function which is perfectly working, and it will go ahead and show me the access records, right? So really, really powerful stuff. The Azure extension was the key factor there in making it super easy to go ahead and add in new functions. Without that, you would have to follow some more steps, go through some documentation. I'm always a fan of making your life as simple as possible and using the tech that makes sense. So in this case, you guys can go ahead and feel free to check out the Disney clone to go ahead and get a nice insight into it, or the GPT DALL-E 2 clone for a more in-depth granular build. That one actually, we did quite a few different cloud functions and different approaches. So you can go ahead and feel free to check that out yourself. So yeah, with that said, guys, that is the Azure Cloud Functions. Now, it's absolutely fantastically powerful. I would really recommend you try it out yourself. give it a try with a couple of the demo projects that I've gone ahead and built on this channel, and get this little starter template set up for yourself so that you know how to deploy a cloud function for your next developer project. And a notable mention, which I really do want you to check out, is the Azure Blob Storage. This essentially is a way to store objects really easy. I've even done a build which will be popping up on the screen right now as well, so you can go ahead and feel free to check that one out. And again, the benefit of using Azure comes down to many things: the scalability, the security, the customization, the uptime. You know, honestly, this is Microsoft services, 99.9999% always going to be promised to be up, and you've got that reassurance with such a large reputable company. And again, you can control your spend, everything in a visible, transparent way with subscription. So it makes everything really concise. And the best part is, guys, once you go ahead and get into the ecosystem, you can actually overlap with a different couple of things. So if you've got a Cosmos DB, you know, with MongoDB under the hood running and storing data and working the way it should work, you can then go ahead and trigger off from that to make Cloud Functions fire off every time a new document adds into your Cosmos database. And then you can add in AI services to go ahead and basically add vector search inside of your Cosmos DB. So lots of things can basically play with each other in the Azure ecosystem, and it's something which I don't feel has been shown a lot on YouTube. So this is why this video was absolutely essential, that I felt like I would make it, right? So it's been an awesome collaboration with Microsoft. I've done so many builds with them on the channel. It's been a pleasure each and every time because the tech just makes sense. And remember, guys, you can click the first link in the description to go ahead and get started with 12 months of free services and even $200 worth of Azure credit. And remember, 55 other free services are included in that. So you can go ahead and click on see all free services. Guys, you've got app configuration, app service, lots of different things, including automation. If you want to see a video on automation, give me a shout and I'll be happy to do something around that. But honestly, you can go ahead and see for yourself. The list is massively extensive, and all of this is absolutely free for 12 months to new customers, right? So you can go ahead and check that out, and you get $200 worth of credit. I would really recommend for the first, you know, if you're early in your developer journey, if you've never used Azure before, this is the ultimate time to get started, build a couple of awesome projects, put them on your developer portfolio, and absolutely smash those interviews. With that being said, guys, today we covered the Microsoft Azure popular AI services in depth with a couple of different demos, with a couple of different use cases and setup examples. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you smash that like button, comment down below what's your favorite part or your favorite Azure service. And if you haven't already, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because without your amazing support, none of this would be absolutely possible. So it's a give and take relationship with the awesome Papa fam, and you guys have been absolutely incredible. And if you want to learn how to code, go ahead and check out our course over at papareact.com/course, where I teach you everything from the ground up and I make it as easy as possible. And on that note, guys, signing out. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.